Farming cows create CO2 emissions that contribute to the greenhouse effect. However, in the egg farms, when male chicks are hatched, they're thrown straight into a blender as they aren't needed. Which statement made you care more? Well, when you look at the first one, you'll see that CO2 emissions also come from other industries, cars, planes, means of transport, and cows aren't the only way that this exists. However, when you look at the cruelty and how the animals suffer, you cannot justify this because you will see how it is important on those campaigns that we will lay out on our side of the house. So, in today's speech, I'll go over on a couple of things. First of all, I'll be addressing what the other side has been saying in today's debate. Then, I'll be also expanding and rebuilding our case. So, first of all, the opposition is trying to tell us that people will change in a way that their cultural background has a lot to do with meat and with eating, animals. But the point is that we have seen such a little contradiction because, first of all, it is a very unrealistic scenario. The first attack is that people who are so attached to their meat sometimes might come from a less developed country where they are not necessarily focusing on buying organic or food that has been made in a mindful way. However, they'll be prioritizing what is the cheapest, what is the most available. In a less developed country, they won't care if their food is coming from a plant-based resource or a meat-based resource. They'll just get what is available. And that's unfortunately the sad scenario for the majority of people on the planet who do just get what is available for them because they don't have the resources to be picky, The second attack, no thank you, is that they're not simply addressing the way that these people could actually change with our side of the house. Because those people who will not have a way of choosing a plant-based meal instead of a meat-based meal, they can do this in our side of the house with reduced suffering of animals because, for example, now they'll be able to choose a more of a friendly and not harmful way that animals are, for example, tested in labs. They can choose cosmetics that will be available with the thing in mind that animals are not hurt, and we're achieving this with least suffering in our campaigns. Then, going down what they have been trying to tell us about the accusing, that people will feel discouraged because they're accused of an action, well, two key attacks here. First of all, when it comes to the environment and when it comes to the whole global situation with climate change, these people are not actually held accountable because you're just one person and 8 billion people that live in the planet, and no one feels actually responsible for that. The fact that something happened and something is progressing because of their singular action. Yes, please.
If individuals are so ready to take responsibility, why haven't they over the last 5 decades?
So, well, exactly, that's the point why the campaigns of environment have been failing, because you could see them happening for the last 30 years at least. There's going to be the COP summit at 30 in Brazil. That's the 30th edition of the summit. And have we seen any change? Well, with the environmental campaigns, we clearly haven't. But even if you don't feel like this is addressing the key point here, you still see that this will happen on both sides of the house, because people might still feel, not held accountable when it comes to suffering, as well as this environmental causes, and that's happening in either world. Then, when it comes to their stance that we can achieve both, we're clearly not, because throughout this entire debate, they have been quite ignoring the stance on, for example, cruelty in the lab industry, but also, for example, animals that are used in transportation, which could be easily replaced with a different alternative. But also, if you look on examples like just regular cruelty, or even places that make special breeds of dogs, they often have severe conditions there that could be replaced easily, and they're not entirely solving for this in their case. And further down, when it comes to their quite huge assumption of the increase of meat consumption, they were trying to draw that it equals the fact that people don't care about the environment, that they're not solving for anything with their campaigns. But we see a quite different point here. We think that the consumption of meat has been increasing simply because there have been more people in the planet being born and more people living. Just in the last decade, we have had the population increase from 7 billion to 8 billion. So we see that as this is the cause for more meat or general food consumption in the world, as simply as that. And then what they were trying to tell you with the fossil fuels and deforestation, how people will now see direct impacts of that, how they will see that this is connecting with meat consumption. Well, again, we have been telling you that environmental campaigns have been going on for so many years. You can at least say 30 with, for example, the COP summit happening for the 30th time in Brazil this year. You can see that they have not achieved their thing, because in the Amazon, the trees are still being cut down despite the best interest of activists, which will actually lead me to our case. As today, I'll be telling you that, first of all, people care about the direct things they can see in their everyday life, and they will be more incentivized to donate or to actually advocate for the change if they see that something is happening. For example, if a company that produces cosmetics will now switch from testing on rats or rabbits to a better way that doesn't harm animals, they will be feeling more incentivized to actually advocate and take action in this field. Yes, please.
But isn't the animal testing itself not taking place anywhere near the lives of those people, and thus would they not be concerned?
Sorry, like the thing is that when it comes to the testing, it is obvious that some companies still do this. And with the campaigns, the people will be informed by this and can actually emphasize like the importance of it, because they'll feel empathy. Like the first speaker has been telling you, people will feel empathy because that's living organisms that also have emotions, they have tissue nerves, they do feel and receive the impacts from influences from the outer world. So this is why they'll be feeling more incentivized to actually care and take direct actions. Then you'll see that this will incentivize to take action and care, because they will see the direct impact. However, when it comes to environments, they will have been hearing about this for so many years, but they don't actually see a change, because guess what? You live in a northern hemisphere and in a shore, like seashore area, and the water is still rising. You live in Venice and you're still being threatened that your city will sink under the water, because for the last 30 years, despite your best interest and your actions, nothing has been changed. So you feel discouraged. However, with suffering, no thank you, you'll be able to actually see the change, for example, because there won't be any more circuses around, or the transportation in some regions could be also changed. Going further down, you'll see that when it comes to achieving this issue, we have this on our side of the house, because people, with the importance of suffering being so emphasized, some of them, we could say probably many of them, could still cut down on the meat consumption, because since the suffering will be so important and so emphasized, both in cosmetics industry, but also probably in the farming industry, people will also be turning to more sustainable options. Probably not totally meat-free, but to options that are more mindful with the animals, and that could reduce and put emphasis on the plant-based meals, for example. Then when it comes to the second argument on today's side, the environmental campaigns have been portrayed negatively in the media. And you've been probably listening to so many of them, at least for the last 15 years, and whenever you hear a new one, you might feel discouraged a little bit, because you have heard the advocacy so much, but you don't see the effects, that nothing changes in the very end. On the other hand, there's also so many more people, like the first speaker has been saying, who are more resistant towards this field, because in the society, this activity is seen as something that makes life harder. They simply despise such activism because they have had situations where people are continually making their lives harder. For example, blocking a highway because, well, cars are bad for the environment, or the plane tickets have risen, the price of plane tickets have risen because, well, the activists made the government implement a tax or a fee that is now going for environmental causes. And that's annoying to people who are in the society, because the activism for environment has been quite harsh for their everyday lives. So with the suffering that is mostly emphasized, we achieve not only the good for the animals, but also we actually address people from a different side, from more the humane side, which people will feel like they're closer to. And with that, I can be more than proud to oppose. Thank you.